This episode is sponsored by Dr. Chrono by EverHealth, the #1 mobile all-in-one EHR. Built specifically for medical practices, Dr. Chrono includes an integrated feature that powers a seamless payments acceptance experience. Dr. Chrono Payments offers multiple ways for patients to pay as well as insurance credit card processing. As a Dr. Chrono customer, you can easily activate our fully integrated payment solution that will streamline your cash flow and help you get paid anytime from anywhere. Deliver the best patient experience with a fast and easy way to collect payments. Visit drchrono.com/payments. That's drchrono.com/payments to learn more about Dr. Chrono today. Direct primary care is an innovative alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Marielle Conception, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care.
DPC means having a relationship with the patient where you actually understand them from start to finish. You understand their nuances, their struggles, the things that they're going to want to do, the things that they will never do, their social situation, family, friends, parents. And that way, when you see them, you understand that they're not just a person with a problem. They're a person who is a husband or a father or a mother or a daughter. And all these things are at play. And so when you're trying to treat them, you're able to see them as the whole, as part of their social and cultural milieu. And I think it delivers better care. I get people and they love that I actually listen. So I'm Dr. Peter Cashio of Code 1 Concierge, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Peter Cashio was born in Louisiana, but moved to Houston, Texas at the age of 6. Shortly after graduating high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps as an intelligence analyst and was stationed in Virginia Beach, Virginia, Okinawa, Japan, and Camp Pendleton, California. Following the Marine Corps, he went on to complete his undergraduate degree in biology at the University of Texas at Austin in 2000, a Master of Science in Developmental Biology at MD Anderson Cancer Center, UT Houston in 2005, and medical school at UT Health Science Center, San Antonio. He completed residency training in emergency medicine at the University of Virginia Hospital, Charlottesville, Virginia in 2012, and is board certified by the American Board of Emergency Medicine. His care philosophy revolves around the idea that the only way to understand a person is to give each person the time necessary to tell their story. He practices by the old medical school saying, "Listen long enough and the patient will describe their diagnosis." His professional interests include preventative care, men's health, pain management, critical care, and especially care for veterans. His family lives in Dripping Springs, and when not in the office, you can find him powerlifting, learning to fly, and writing. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Cashio.
Hi, Marielle. How are you? Glad to be here.
I'm doing great. I am coming off of weekend where fellow California DPC doctors and myself went to the California Academy of Family Practice resident meetings, medical student meeting,
Nice.
The update on our, do you prescribe vitamin D? Do you check for vitamin D? That type of meeting where what you said in your intro is so important. And that's, I feel, what really got people who came to our table. Some of them were current program directors. I will put a shout out there for them.
Oh, good.
Who were asking more about DPC, not only to have resources, because we've created this calidpc.com, where if you're wanting to know more and connect with California specific DPC doctors, there's a whole listing of us. So to not only have that as a known resource, but to also say, like, now I want to know about DPC, because that's the type of medicine that I signed up to go to medical school for.
Right.
So I really love that, your opening statement is just really a great representation of the relationship-based medicine that we all do in DPC.
Yeah, 100%. That has been the biggest revelation for me starting this clinic. So
So one of the things that I had seen on your social media platform, and I love it because it's you and your clinic and all different aspects of your clinic are being highlighted, but occasionally you'll turn the camera on yourself and you'll do some talking about your clinic. And I just wanted to get started with thinking of this space where you are a physician, you're a DPC physician now, and your experience being a veteran and being a Marine. So you went on to talk about in this one particular video, we never promised you a rose garden. And you said, you said in that video that doing things that are focused, disciplined types of work daily, that was the kicker there, daily will get you to your goals faster than anything else. So I want to go back now with that quote on the table from your social media and ask about what does focused, disciplined work mean to you from your past before you became a DPC doctor?
Yeah. So prior to that, it was, for example, young guys, young Marines or young potential recruits say, I'm going to be a Marine. They have this vision of the uniforms, the sexy uniforms, gorgeous women going, ooh, blowing things up, doing cool, exciting things. And then you get to infantry school, which we do a very abbreviated version, which is what I did an abbreviated version. And it's we call it the suck because you're climbing mountains. It's cold. It's wet. You're checking headspaces in a machine gun. You're doing all this stuff that is not sexy. It's not fun. But it's absolutely necessary. And, you have your sergeants every day saying, it doesn't matter. You need to do it, right? Vigilance saves your lives and the lives of those around you, right? And, so I really learned that no matter how glorious it is, and there are times when things are glorious, right? You have to put in the work every single day to get to that point. Otherwise, you're going to harm yourself or harm others, right? So that's kind of when I brought into medical school and when I brought into the ER doctor, now DPC doctor.
Fantastic. And I think that, as we get into our chat today, I think that people will hear from your discipline as well as the repeated reminder of how discipline can work in your favor will come through in what we're talking about. So bring us to, you're an emergency room physician and you're doing your thing in the ER. What on earth made you even think about DPC?
I have to be honest, most ER physicians, and I can't speak for family medicine, but most ER physicians have this experience in the third and fourth years of medical school where you do rotation after rotation. And for a little while, you say, wow, I could be a family medicine doctor. I could be an OBGYN. I could do psych. And then you reach a point where you're like, no, not really, not sustained. And then it's like, oh yeah, right? And so most ER physicians go into emergency medicine to do the big sexy things, to do whatever, to be a master of many things. And critical care resuscitation is our strong suit. The reality is a lot of emergency medicine is my blood sugar is high, my cholesterol is high, my blood pressure's up, and my doctor sent me to the ER, or my doctor's not there. And I would hear I've done emergency medicine over a decade, 12 years at this point. And I would hear story after story about primary care doctors, so-called abandoning patients. And, as a physician, sometimes you take it with a grain of salt, right? People have their perceptions that may not always be true, but it became a theme over and over again. And some of the struggles in emergency medicine are, you have these big corporate emergency medicine groups that are like ER doctors are a commodity. You can be replaced at a moment's notice. There is no loyalty. You're having to see 20, 30 patients a shift. And it doesn't matter if there's a critical, you're resuscitating a critical person or a code, you still get patients screaming at you like, well, they haven't seen a doctor in 30 minutes and they're mad and they don't care, right? So it's a lot of burnout. So I was reaching the point where I thought, I can't do this anymore because I actually care about humans, and taking 3 minutes to have a conversation about blood sugar management gets you yelled at by the clipboard, armada in the ER saying, I'm sorry, Dr. Cashio, but you need to go see more patients. So I'm sure I've heard from you guys in family medicine, it's a similar thing. You just have no time. So I can't do this. And then we're put into impossible situations in the ER, like psychosocial, medical, legal situations that there is no good result. Talked to a friend of mine, Michael Garrett, who's another ER doctor turned direct primary care. Yeah, love Michael. And I think I had posted on the DPC group, and Mike said, hey, I'm close. Why don't you come by and visit my clinic? And this is in 2019. And he said, after a couple of visits, he's like, dude, you can do this. I was terrified. And he's like, no, just take it easy, take it slow. And you can do this. You're smart enough. You're a board certified ER doctor. You can learn this, but just take your time. So I opened up in January of 2020, and the pandemic hit. And so that was brutal. But about 18 months later, I left the ER full time and started growing my clinic. Because again, just being back in the ER part time was just soul sucking. So,
well, especially as you describe that, it's very interesting because when you're saying, as an ER physician, you see the full scope of things. You just see it from a different level of acuity than
right.
a family doctor typically sees it in an outpatient clinic. But, when you're talking also about the similarities between our professions or specialties when it comes to, and I don't seem to have any autonomy in determining my schedule or the quality of which I will put into every single patient visit because you're on the clock. Like I remember Dr. James Gore, another emergency physician who has now become a DPC physician working with his wife, Emily, at Halcyon Health, Dr. Emily Scott. He said, the number one thing is, what is your insurance? It's not like, what brings you in today? And also, it's so similar to the frustrations of the dumpster fires that we get on our plates and
Really? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. The dumpster fires, because it's like, well, because you didn't have access to your doctor who knows you when you needed them, you guys are like the stopgap. It's great. Oh, yeah. No one in this community has a physician. Go to the ER for any little thing. And it's, I remember, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast, standing there in the emergency room check-in area for my own son when we were there for tachypnea. And I was like hearing, in the background, well, the urgent care told me to come here because my blood pressure is 150/90, and that's a medical emergency. Or, well, I have this red thing on my face, and that means I need a CT scan right now. And it was like, oh boy. And then versus, I think about even today, as I'm sure you have, it's, well, today, those types of acute questions that came along my plate already before we started recording this podcast, I was able to get back to that patient, because we're not seeing 4,000 patients on our panel, because we know our patients, because we know their hesitancies to take medication or not, all of those things. That's why we do this. I love it. So as you went into the space of Dr. Garrett saying, take it easy and take it slow, what did that translate to in terms of you actively opening your DPC? Because I know you mentioned during the pandemic, but you're also winding your time down from what you were doing in the ER to go to DPC.
Yeah. So, my biggest fear was who was I to, imposter syndrome? Who am I to pretend I didn't go to family medicine or internal medicine residency? Who am I, right? What Michael Garrett's suggestion was, get one type of, just take a patient as they come to where you feel comfortable. So what do you do for mixed hyperlipidemia? What do you do for new onset hypertension? What do you do? And you start to just learn and read such that, I accumulate like 600 up-to-date credits in a year. After a while, you get more and more comfortable. You reach out to people and you say, hey, what do you do in this sticky situation? So you get more and more comfortable. So that first year, I might have had 60 patients. And if, I see a lot of folks posting in the DPC forums on Facebook, how they opened and they had 500 or 300. And that's great. But from where I started, that would have been overwhelming and something probably would have been missed. But about 18 months in, I started getting a lot more comfortable. And I realized, as you sort of alluded to, that a lot of the complaints are the same, not sounding like the critically ill ones, but you don't need to go crazy. And so it's like finding that this is clinic patients. So that population is by nature generally less sick. And my population, just where we're located, is generally less sick, right? So those are lessons you learn from residency in medical school.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Thank you to Spruce Health for supporting the My DPC Story podcast. The ways we communicate have changed dramatically over the past decades, but technology and tools in healthcare have not kept pace. Patients want more access and digital convenience, as well as the ability to text their care teams. Care teams are inundated with more communication and rising expectations, but are still using tools and technology stuck in prior decades. Spruce Health created a solution for the tech-forward DPC practice by creating a communication product designed to serve both the patient and the doctor through intuitive HIPAA-compliant workflows, tagging, scheduled messages, and triage templates ready for use, whether you're on your phone or in the exam room. New users get 20% off for the first 12 months of a paid plan with code MARYAL20. That's MARYAL20. So check out Spruce Health today at sprucehealth.com or check out the link in the show notes. Yeah. And let me ask you there, because you mentioned up to date, and that's a great resource that we have available to us as physicians. But I would love if you could speak to the fact that like you're going into there with also a medical degree. There was a physician's assistant who I spoke with who was talking about how they went into what they thought was a physician's assistant role, but because of the model of where that corporation was in providing care to patients, a lot more was put on that patient's or that PA's plate. So can you speak to, the difference between a physician doing things like, I've had a ton of time, like knowing what's normal and knowing like what to do in acute situations, plus adding on up to date to that? Because I'm asking because I'd love if you could speak to the fact that like you can't learn to be a doctor up to date. You can enhance what you have.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, my background, I was a Marine, and then I went to college, and then I went to graduate school. I got a genetics degree, a master's of genetics. And then I went to medical school. And so, like I say, I like to joke that I graduated from the 22nd grade. And when you add in residency. And so, everything I've learned in medicine. And so my experience was I've done critical care medicine, what do they say? We do over 10,000 hours in residency at least in terms like such that I'm not a brag, but any ER resident in their second year on an ICU rotation can handle just about any emergency by themselves. They don't need to freak out for the most part. They can handle intubation, they can handle airway management, pressures, pressors, arrhythmias, that kind of stuff. And so you become very comfortable with it, right? And so when I became an ER, tried to open a DPC clinic, it was like, okay, where's my critical care and lots of thousands and a decade of being an ER physician. And now I'm going to learn an additional skill set, right? Whereas, the PAs I've seen are generally better trained than NPs. But if we want to open that can of worms, it's kind of horrifying. And when I used to be an ER physician down in Corpus Christi a couple of years ago, there was an NP training program at Texas A&M University, the branch. And we would get these brand new NP graduates who had literally just graduated in May, and now they're working in the ER in the summer. And they're terrified, and they're wearing the white coat. And I would say, okay, guys, you don't know anything. You learn less than nothing. Your training sucked. I'm sorry to tell you. That being said, if you're open to training, I will work with you. Come to me, and we'll start to talk, the Socratic method, right? If you're going to present to me, they're an X age patient with the following medical conditions presenting for a chief complaint of blah. And why do we do that? Because it structures your mind to think, oh, what questions do I need to ask? Or what did I forget what am I going to need to order, right? Or to evaluate this patient. And so I think that it's a fault of our system that we think that we can replace physicians with literally thousands. I probably have 20, 30,000 clinical hours at this point. I'm not bragging, but just, if you count medical school residency, clinical practice. And I'm still, like I tell my patients, I don't know everything. I can't possibly know everything. So if you have a different opinion or you read something, bring it up. I've learned from my patients, my nurses, my staff. And sometimes I see NP students will come along who they think you can't teach them anything and they're dangerous. But I think, the training is not great. And so I don't know where you want to go from that, but there's a lot that you could talk about in that space.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, your experience and what you've seen out there, because when direct primary care clinics are out there and, on places like the Mapper where you can't necessarily see the difference between physician-led clinic and a non-physician-led clinic, I think that's important for people to know. And it's important for their physicians to hear as well, because, physicians, like there was a group of 90 physicians I was reading a story of that they got replaced, their hospitalist group. It wasn't ER physicians, but hospice group got replaced by non-physicians. And, it's like ER is definitely a place where that's happening, where there might not be a physician on site during, a shift or whatever. And so I think it's really important for not only physicians who are like us attendings, but also for the people in medical school and residency to hear, because no matter what, do not forget your value as a physician. I think that's so important for people. Because, as we're doing things like, what else can I do other than what I've been doing, or what else can I do other than what I've been seeing? And you're thinking about DPC, it is very important to never forget how important your training is and how important the thousands of hours. like you said, 10,000. The baseline I use when I'm talking to people is minimum 15,000 hours that we have as trained physicians to be able to know what's normal and to know what's not. And so, I put that out as a word of encouragement for those who are like, I'm already overwhelmed with what am I going to do with my career? Should I do DPC? Do I even matter? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So that said, now, when you were making the change, when you said you had 60 patients in your first year, one of the things that you had talked about also in your social media was growth of your practice and growth, just the growth mindset. So you shared that a mentor had asked you, and I don't know if this is Michael Garrett or not.
No, it's a different mentor.
Okay, yeah. And you know exactly what I'm about to ask. That mentor said, are you in DPC or are you just playing? And soon after you went from 60 patients, 66 was what you had in the summer of 21, if I am quoting that correctly, to 188 by December 21. So can you share about how did you receive that comment and how did you think about growth differently after that comment was made to you?
It's a great question, and thanks for asking it. For those who know me well, the best way to motivate me is to tell me I can't do something. Right? To call me out, or you just whatever, right? Oh, you'll never be a Marine. I heard that one. You'll never go to college. I heard that one. Who are you to go to graduate school and get research papers published, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And every time it was like that scene from Good Will Hunting, right? He slaps the girl's phone number on the window and it's like, how do you like them apples, right? That's kind of my modus operandi. And so that mentor, she's a great lady, she knew it and she called me out on it. Got mad. I really got mad at her that she was right. And so I was like, okay, fine. If I'm going to do it, what does that mean? That's a lot of local networking. It's not so much networking. It's just social media, like Instagram, Facebook posts in my local groups and also general Facebook. Yeah, and just making connections with people. That's what's helped me grow. And I'm a little over 200 now, and I kind of stopped because there's only so much. I provide such a level of care that I feel like I can't handle anymore. But now that we have another physician coming on later this year, I now know that there's somebody to cover on my off days and vice versa. So I don't feel so like I'm going to leave my patients in the lurch. So we're doing it. We're ramping up again. We're redoing the website. We've got social media marketing plan already set up, and we're just going to start talking. And it's a slow game for those who might be listening. Social media rarely is I do the post and all of a sudden I get 5 people sign up. It doesn't work that way, right? It's, the idea of the long tail. So you do all these things and you build this body of work and you get overnight success months later or a year later. I have people joining my practice now who saw social media posts from a year ago. And they're like, I kept you in mind and this is the time. And now I'm ready. And the other thing I would tell people is if you're going to push in the late summer, early fall, because people are thinking about a new doctor for January 1st. And then the other thing I would tell people, Marielle, is that you need to do a really good job of explaining DPC. So to be fair, I chose Concierge because people can wrap their mind around that. But when you say DPC, people are stuck in this mindset of, well, I either have insurance and so therefore I have a doctor, or I don't have insurance and I have no access. And when I tell them in the ER out in the world, those are not the only 2 options. You can pay, some places are as low as $70 a month around here. And you have a doctor that's your doctor. And they're like, what?
Absolutely. I'm here nodding my head because my Lyft driver who drove me from my bachelorette day at Disneyland, I had a few hours at Disney California Adventure, but back to the airport to fly back to Sacramento.
Yeah.
I was like, I tell all of my Lyft and Uber drivers about DPC, but I was like, yeah. And then I, segue into how in hell do I talk about DPC to every single person? There's always a way. There's always a way. And everybody understands the pain of how you're saying, you might have an insurance card and you might have a doctor, but when are you actually going to see that doctor? And do you see that doctor every single time you go into the clinic? Probably the answer is no. What is the benefit of having a primary care doctor or primary care providing doctor on your insurance card if you can't actually access them for primary care and you have to go to the ER anyways? And then when you talk about the people who are like, no, but I'm uninsured, undocumented, and we don't care because we're a human being. So that's what matters to us. I mean, we're not going into veterinary medicine here. Not yet. That's another whole other pod. But the other thing too is that when you're talking about when people understand finances, especially an Uber and Lyft driver, because they're working for rides. And they're like, wait a minute, like you're telling me no matter what, I could have a doctor for me that knows me, that is accessible when I need them. And how many conversations have ended in, you said there was someone local. Who is that? And I was like, well, here, halcyonhealthdpc.com. There you go. And then, so it's so awesome when people do get that click in their heads, and, people being potential patients, potential physicians who are thinking about DPC, potential people who are benefits advisors building DPC into self-funded plans. It goes over everybody. When you get to what is the value proposition that we're bringing, mind-blowing. Shouldn't be mind-blowing because, it's not new what we're doing in terms of this is how people used to be before HMOs, but it's like when everything is about magical specialty care.
Well, your insurance companies have a bigger marketing budget than we do. That has set the mind of my patients. So I have now probably 10 patients who have what they describe to me as, AAA gold-plated or platinum, whatever healthcare insurance, and they're my patients. And every single one of them, they're like, well, I'm like, so what brings you here today? Why'd you join? I have the greatest insurance. I can't find a doctor. Like nobody's taking patients, or I can't see my doctor for 3 months, or I have this doctor and they never listen to me. And I've got my PA telling me what my results are, but I haven't actually talked to the doctor in a year. I haven't seen the doctor in a year. Right. And so I'm just like, and so how is that working out for you? So it's an emotional investment first, right? I always tell people who listen, I said, look, it's almost like you're getting married, right? Because people invest so much of their hopes and expectations and like, maybe this doctor will be the one, right? And that's why people don't just join up right away. Or most of them, some do. It takes them a while. They're like, what if? Because even though the cost may not be much, the emotional investment in choosing a doctor is a big deal, right? And so I always tell people that. And then, for those who are financially minded, I said, so you pay through the marketplace $1,200 to $1,800 a month for insurance. Did you know that there's a way, if your family, depending on your family's needs, like there are these things called health shares that work really well. And you could be paying as low as $400 or $500 for your family, and like for catastrophic care, and you can get a DPC doctor. It blows them away.
It totally does. Totally does. And, a couple things, like just going back to when you were mentioning how it might not be initially that somebody signs up. One, I think that's why word of mouth really helps our practices, because it's, I already emotionally know you. You're my best friend next door or whatever. And that's your doctor. I'm in. I trust you and I know you. And I know you know me, and you wouldn't be talking to me about this if it wouldn't help me too. So that's one thing. And then two, when you were mentioning that it takes time for people to, know that you exist on social media and then follow you, see what you're doing, and then potentially that leads to a membership. It's the same way even for physicians. I had a physician reach out who saw my post from 2 years ago. That is what this physician quoted on my own page talking about direct primary care. And literally the question was, so I saw this post that you did 2 years ago, and it sat in my head this whole time as I did job that sucked, job that sucked, job that sucked. And so, can you tell me a little bit more about it? So I say that because, especially as you mentioned, we're going to talk about how you're adding a new doctor this October, but like that stuff matters. Like it really does matter, not only for patient membership, but also to grow your practice in terms of the physicians who are joining you.
I mean, if you want to segue into that, we can, because that is a perfect example of how I ended up with this new physician. So his name is Dr. Zach Patrick. He's an ER physician like me, and I met him at my first ER job in 2012. We worked our first job together out of residency, and I love him to death. And for a long time, I thought he was the opposite of everything I was, but we've been close friends ever since. And, I told him a couple of years ago in 2019 that I was going to open a DPC practice. He's like, wait, what's that? And I explained it, and he's like, you're crazy. And then he came out to visit my practice. So just FYI, this is my additional building. So we have 2 buildings that we have now. I got my office over here. We were just in the original space, and it was micro practice. I had no help really. And he's been talking to me over the years, and his frustration with emergency medicine has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And he's one of the smartest, most caring guys I've ever known, right? And so last fall, he says, so, hey, Pete, how's your practice going? And I said, why don't you come check it out and we'll talk? And this is like a year ago, right? So he comes out and he sees our other building, other campus. And he's like, well, what happened there? And I said, well, we got bigger and we have these additional providers, non-medical providers, people that, need space. And we have this whole holistic thing where, kind of, oh, you need a trainer? You can talk to our trainer over here. You need nutrition? It's all right here. You don't have to go anywhere. Because for the geographics of my city, and I'm in Dripping Springs, Texas, Austin suburb, people don't want to go to be above the junction of Highway 71 and 290. It's a horrible traffic mess, right? So if you can provide that service locally, it's an excellent quality, they'll do it, right? And so he was just really blown away. And he's like, okay, so how do you make it work? Show me your numbers. And I'm like, here you go. And so we agreed in principle about a month ago that he was going to join the practice. And I had my birthday party recently. He came and we sat for hours talking. And 2 days later, so I'm driving around my neighborhood looking at houses. He's all right. I think I found a house I'm buying. And he's serious. So we're agreed. We know what's happening. And I'm like, are you sure about this? He's like, dude, he's like, no joke. If you can do it, I can do it. That's the attitude, right?
Absolutely. And what an amazing birthday present. I would take that birthday present any day. That's awesome.
I get to work with a friend, and he's even more he's really crunchy granola. So it'll be a nice addition, a little nice balance to the clinic practice. And the patients are super excited. I've mentioned it, unofficially to a couple of them. They love seeing the practice grow. They like to see the success because it's validation for them that they made the right choice, right? And that I'm not going anywhere.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Have you tried an AI scribe in your clinic? Well, I've tried so many, and I can say Heidi Health is the best AI scribe I have come across thus far. With Heidi Health, I can create unlimited, customizable templates for my notes to help me truly cut down on the time I'm spending charting. Template for pediatric well child check? Done. Template for weight loss management? Done. Some of my favorite things I've built into my AI template, beyond the general soap note, are having a list of actionables for our team to take after a patient visit, having the diagnoses listed, and creating an after-visit summary for our patients. Not only have I found Heidi Health to be the most helpful, customizable AI scribe so far, it's also more affordable than most out there. So try Heidi Health today and see how you can harness the power of an AI scribe for your practice. To get an entire month of Heidi Pro free, go to the homepage of mydpcstory.com and click on the Heidi Health ad.
Definitely. And that's a huge thing, when I was in fee for service, the number one question that I would get from my patients, especially those who are older, was like, are you planning on staying? There's such a PTSD from the patient side of things when it's like, here's a really great doctor, but the way that the system is killing them by, soul sucking their job satisfaction out, not providing autonomy.
Messages every night.
Yeah. It's like there are multiple dumpster fires going on in the U.S. healthcare system. And that, unfortunately, is a question that patients have as a result of that, of the multiple burning dumpster fires. But when it comes to growth, because, you started talking about how your clinic grew, this mentor had, set off that pissed off fire in you, and you were like, I'll show you. But when it comes to growth, and now that you're growing with a new physician, can you touch more on how to strategically grow? Because when you're going even from that 60-ish to almost 200, and there's some people out there who are like opening with 200 or going, to 600 patients in a year. And that's a shout out to Dr. Ashley Hendry at Mid-South DPC.
Good for her, yeah.
But when you think about growth, do you have any advice as to how to grow the clinic, depending on, you might have 2 kids, you might have no kids, you might be married, you might not be, but how would you have people think about growth in terms of still maintaining quality, access to care, as well as your own, maintaining your own autonomy and your own time away from practice that you need?
That's a great question. Probably the most important question. It's a conversation I have all the time with some of my colleagues. So the first question you have to ask is, what kind of primary care doctor do I want to be? Shout out to Vince Lassie. He'll do YouTube doing a vasectomy, and I'm like, all right, let's get after it, right? I may have done it in residency, which, by the way, I will never be doing those things. But Vince, he's fearless, right? He'll do all these things, and he probably charges a lower price, but that's okay. I just decided that I was tired of being burnt out, and so I said, this is how I want to work, and this is the level that I want to make. And so I basically designed the life that I want to have. Just as a background, I'm a single dad. I have my kids from the divorce. I'm recently divorced, or a couple years ago, I have custody. So I'm a father. And so I need to be there for my kids. And that, so at first it really irritated me, to be honest, because I'm like, I really would, if I didn't have kids, I could really blow this up. But long term, who cares, right? Your kids are more important, and your kids will be pissed if you weren't there for that important thing. And I would be sad that I missed it, because I missed a lot as an ER doctor. So why replicate that? So I had to decide, what kind of life do I live? And, what kind of availability would I have, right? Am I available 24/7? Nope. I'm very upfront. Am I available on the weekends for emergencies? Sure, right? But if it's something that can wait, that's fine. And patients generally are very good with that. And so with that in mind, I'm very upfront about, I'm more accessible than any doctor you've ever had. I see some of the young doctors saying, well, I said 24/7, but really I don't want to be available 24/7. Then just be honest about it. Don't hide it. But say, and you will be more responsive and more caring than any physician that they've ever had. End of story. And if they don't like it, if they're mad, then, as Doug Farago says, be well, right? Have a great life, right? And again, depending where you're at, pricing is important. So Josh Umber will say a lot about pricing. I agree to a point, but then I've learned that people, the more we charge them, the more they value what I provide. So if I'm charging you $65 a month, you just don't care. I'm a medication prescription refill guy. That's all I am. And that's the reality, right? But if I charge you more, and that more has varied over the years, then people, they'll listen, they'll pay attention, they tend to, because they're having to put what to them is a decent chunk of change down. So I'm going to listen to the doctor because I'm paying for his expert advice.
So for the listeners here, this is definitely a DPC moment, prime example of why it is so important to know about DPC and to, like in our cases, Dr. Cashio's and mine, to jump into it, because he had to take a break between recording sessions to go and pick up his kids. So family comes first, and now the podcast. So thank you so much, Dr. Cashio, for coming back in a different office and joining us again today.
Happy to be back. Thanks for having me again.
So where we were talking, we left off talking about growth. And one of the things that I wanted to ask was, as you look to October, you look to next month, a month from when we're recording, you're about to bring on another physician. And so I wanted to ask about, you mentioned earlier how you capped your practice around 200, because that's the place where you found that, you could still be a quality doctor, be the dad that you wanted to be, the person that you need to be apart from those two roles. How do you advise other people to think about growth when it's not just coming down to the numbers in your practice?
Well, so you have to ask yourself, what is the growth for? What's your reason, right? Are you looking to make as much money as you can? What is your life situation? If you're a single person, like out of residency, and maybe you're married, but you have no kids, like go ahead and go crazy, right? But if you're like me, single dad with custody, and you want to be present, and there's a limit to what you can do. Like I said before, I think on the first part, in an ideal world, I would have 500 or 600 patients to begin with, and I wouldn't have to do anything. But that is a level of service that the way I provide service that I can't actually do. It just becomes overwhelming. In fact, actually, it led to a burnout situation. So what happened is I get to about 200, 180 to 200, and it's kind of stayed there because would just have to be inundated. I feel now, I understand a little bit of what a primary care physician has or goes through, where it's like not portal message, but texts and emails, and oh my God, I have this crisis, and oh my God, I need this form filled out, and oh my God, can you see me today? And why not? And it just never ends. And so what I was able to do is I was reading some accounts from these old doctors, like doctors who grew up in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And they said, I would have my nurse get all the lab results and get all the things and just kind of go through and highlight what was abnormal and show me the abnormals. And then everything else just got forwarded to the patients, and I would follow up when I had time. And it just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God. So I happened to have 2 part-time nurses who were smart and good. And I said, can we do this? Can we start this process where you see this? And they did. They love it. They're engaged. And so getting that process involved where If the lab results come back and you don't see any abnormalities, they can just send it to the patient and I'll follow up with my email. If they get an X-ray and they want to know what the result is, here it is. Dr. Cashio will follow up. If it's an abnormal one, he'll be right behind me with the abnormals. So for me, it was getting the processes, because you can't make more time. There's only so much time that you have. So for me, growth was, how do I maximize the time? How do I free up time for patient care? And now that I have got the processes and I'm actually ready to grow and then bring in a physician on board, I can say to this new physician, here are the processes which will save you time and keep you from getting buried by all this crap that drives us all crazy. And on the other side is, patient expectations. Do not expect me, unless it's a critical result, to be calling you at night with the result or to be on the weekend. Like, we'll get them to you. And, just setting good expectations that people are very happy. Like, they're very happy with those limits.
And like you said, at the end of the day, the quality of care that you're offering, even, working through those processes, is still a very different experience than they've ever had before. And that's why they continue to be your members. And so, when we talk about workflows and processes, I think that that's where the value comes in. So if you're newly listening to this podcast, listen, just like, you mentioned how you listened to the words, you read the words of physicians who would do like primary care for a long time and have these processes where like they were employing their staff to help them get through these processes. You can do whatever works for you. So like in our practice, I've gotten to the point where sometimes there's so many things going on my plate that I'm like, okay, we have a HIPAA compliant place where we can leave voice messages back and forth in the back end. And I have our nurse say, like, these are the portal messages that I need answers for. And then because of, this is so not surprising to people that I'm an audio learner because of podcasts, but it's like, I'll be, speaking back in a voice message in our platform, like, okay, so for patient 1, do this, patient 2, do this, patient 3, ask them this question or whatever. And it still gets me to the, accessibility goal that I have during the end of the day, but it's in a different way than I ever could do in fee for service. So I love that you mentioned, how you are working through your own processes. And I hope that those words are very helpful for people, especially as they're growing or even planning on opening. No.
And by the way, you just taught me something, by the way. Well, I can dictate a note in my platform and have my nurse follow up on it. It's a lot easier. Very nice. Thanks.
Awesome. I'm happy to help. Yeah, it's so nice when you have an entrepreneurial brain about you added to the doctor brain about you. And you're like, whoa, I can actually like do things without having to have some admin approve my workflow. It's so freeing. So let me go back to your building, because now you have a newer space because you're building a whole center where you mentioned, like if you need a physical fitness trainer, if you need a nutritionist, you're looking to have a true medical home for your patients so that they don't have to cross that freeway. For you, bring us back to when you were looking for space, because some people open with no space, like myself. Some people open with spaces based on, their proximity to their home. How did you go about finding a space?
Well, I wanted some place that was close to home. So I didn't want to have to commute. I wanted to be able, I knew that I had to get my kids to and from school. So I wanted some place that would not add a burden. And I was looking for simple. I'm a big believer in the KISS principle, right? Keep it simple, stupid. The fewer things that I have to worry about or would be costly to me, the better. And to be honest, I kind of prayed about it. I'm like, okay, there's all these options in my area. Looked at some there's a brand new, which has turned out to be a very expensive but very profitable, retail park right next to my home, my development. But it's ridiculously expensive, triple net, and it is very like the people who business owners I know rent space, they hate it now. I'm like, oh, didn't do that. So I found a space I thought was pretty good. I got creative. I lowered my expectations, which was my patients need to have the fanciest office you could ever imagine. And I'm watching people through like DPC docs on Facebook, like, you don't need much. I was like, I guess I don't. Okay. And so I met with the owner of the local business park, and I had told her what I was doing and what my mission was. And you could just see her get so excited. She's like, oh my God, yes, we'll figure it out. She actually gave me basically $10,000 in credit and did it pro bono. Like, she's like, we're going to do this and we're going to set up your space like this. And when you're ready to expand, let me know. Like, I want this to be your home. Right. And it's worked out really well. They're very good to us. But for me, what I found is, yes, indeed, when I had 800 square feet and that was it for everything, my patients don't care. Like, this isn't a brag, but just to give people who are thinking about DPC and what they think their patients want versus what they actually want. I have several multi-millionaire clients, patients. Like, you just, if you ever say their name, you would know it. And I have a nice but humble, office space, and I have a nice but humble exam room. And they don't care. Doesn't matter to them at all. It looks clean. It's professionally done. I decorated it, so go me. And at the end of the day, they don't care. They don't need the fancy bling blingy, with bringing your poodle in and there needs to be a watering bowl. Like, they don't need that. They don't. Like, they just know your people and know that the care that you will give them, that I give them, or whomever is listening, that matters to them like 10 times more than the environment. Obviously, make it clean and blah, 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 but you can make it look like a home. I think I saw pictures of Doug Farrago's clinic and it looked like somebody's living room. I'm like, oh, that's cool, right? And some other ones are really fancy schmancy. Somebody, I can't remember who, has like their office space, like you can see outside, there's trees and there's windows everywhere. It's gorgeous, right? I wish I knew who that was. But anyway, like, so it's just like, let your office space kind of reflect your personality.
I love that. And if you really talk to, especially those people who are thinking about it or planning DPC, or even people who are like wanting to just get just a infusion of inspiration, talk to DPC owners around you, because it's really quite amazing how, when you're talking about like people who have the money to have a doctor fly to them, they still choose direct primary care because it's not the office that most people are signing up for. I mean, we're talking, I would estimate, over 90% of the people could give a crap about where you're practicing,
right,
as long as it's safe. Like, that's a big thing. But, when it comes to, I signed up for my doctor to take care of me and my doctor who knows me to take care of me. And that is what, never forget that. And I just went to a home visit this morning, and that's what I used to do. I used to do all home visits in telemedicine, and I forgot my bag this morning. So I had to go back and grab it, because my husband, on the day that we're recording, he started DPC, and I was like, oh my God, I need to like make sure he has a stethoscope and I have a stethoscope, because we're working at different times. But it was like, they didn't care that I rolled up with a bag. Like, they cared because I showed up as the doctor who would be able to talk to them about their post-hospitalization. So, it's so true what you say, that like, there's not signing up. Our patients are not signing up because of the physical spaces. Although if you have beautiful ones, like, again, I call out Dr. Brian Blank and Ember Modern Medicine in Greenville, South Carolina. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I love that his patients have that. I would go there and be a patient if I lived in South Carolina, but it's not a necessity.
No, and I think, to riff on that briefly, I think the reason that we might think that's important is because if you're in the traditional system, the system sucks. And there's this thinking, well, I can't compensate with much, but we can make it look pretty. I mean, we're not plastic surgeons. So, but shout out to the plastic surgeon hearing this. Like, yeah, you have a certain thing you have to, aesthetic you need to adhere to, but you're right. Like, you don't have, like, as long as your care is great, and then later if you get some money and you do really well and you really want to snazz it up, then go for it, right? But as long as it's not impacting the patients, we don't care.
And, because this is before Black Friday that this is going to come out too, if there is something that you're like, I would love to have this, but I just don't need it today, but it also could be on sale for Black Friday. Like, I have a list going that's like every Black Friday, I look for these particular things. And like, for me, I moved into a space last October, and I wanted to have this like 1980s bathroom not look like it was from the 80s. And so I used contact paper that I got online on Black Friday for like way cheaper than it normally is. And, it was just contact paper, but it sure as heck made a difference in the aesthetics of my clinic. And I'm like so happy with it. So, just another random tip if you hadn't heard that one from me before. Yeah. So now tell us about when you were, adding your new physician and you're opening up a larger space. At what point did you decide that was going to be the right decision for you? And how did you strategically plan that space, given that your dream for Code One Concierge is different today than when you started?
Yeah, strategic planning. No, I mean, so that implies that I was a deep thinker about it. So first of all, I identified the need, and then I just listened to what my patients were saying. I really hate going X. I really need to get a hold of Y, but I can never get a hold of Y. And I'm like, okay. And I don't know if I told you this in the first part of the podcast, but there's a psychologist who's a friend of mine who, when I mentioned, I really want somebody that someone can, do you know somebody who could do therapy? And he's like, I can do it. He kicked me out of my office and I'd go into the lab area and work. It's fine. I don't care. So I already knew that like patients were fine with that and they were already seeing in there. I'm like, okay, well, if that model works, what cheap space can I find that's going to help? Right. And I talked to the owner of the business park that I'm at. I'm like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. They're like, you can have the space right next door. They're moving out and we'll give it to you for dirt cheap. And we'll even help you modify it. And so I got that counselor. I got the second counselor. I've got hopefully a third one coming. We're probably going to do physical massage or acupuncture or something like that. Other space. And then there's a ketamine space where we're about ready to do ketamine infusions for mental health. So I've got the counselors in place. So how did I do it? I said, here's the need. And if patients are already coming to me, how can I provide that space to them, that service to them so that it reinforces my brand? So I get rent. I don't take, at first I thought, well, do I ask for a percentage of revenue? And I got into this like skeezy, like I didn't, as I first started thinking about it, I was like, oh, that's like, I'm working for this corporate medical group and they are billing thousands in my name and giving me $1 in return. It's the same. I'm like, no, I'm not going to be that way. So, but I rent the space out. And what's nice is that my patients like, oh, Dr. Cashio, he's the guy. He has all the people either right there or they're in 5 minutes and you can get a hold of them. It's not. And so it was just, that was the thing. And also I wanted a gym to work out that was right next door. So it would have no excuse not to work out. You know, it's evolved into some place that's like a mental health facility, a mental health campus more than anything right now. So, and now having another, and I also thought ahead, like if I want another physician, where can I put them? Like, you know, now we have room over there. We have an extra exam room. So if in 18 months we have time, now we need a third physician, which might be happening, then, you know, we already have a space already set up and it's like, and Code One takes over everything. And then we just rent out more space or at least more space that we can move all our mental health people into. So it's, I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely. And as you talk about, you know, second physician, possibly even third physician coming, tell me about how agreements are working. Are they 1099s? How are they being brought into Code One?
So I heard a phrase today that I think resonates. And I've had a conversation with Nicole Hemkes and Vince Lassie and Josh Umber about all these things. And there is founders get paid and employees get a salary. And it sounds kind of harsh, but reality is that, you know, this is something that's my vision and I'm doing it. And so, but I don't want to take advantage of the physicians that are coming on board. I don't want to do that, but I also recognize that I'm providing you with a space. I'm providing you with processes and personnel and all this stuff. And so the plan is, and we're finalizing his contract, is going to be 1099 and either like a 50-50 or 60-40, like he'll get either 50 or 60% of his revenue that he generates. The rest comes back to the clinic, right? To pay for salaries and overhead and everything else. And then I, as the founder and sort of like making sure everything runs, will get a small percentage of that. And I think that works, right? It gives him agency. Like you eat what you kill, the more people you get, the more money you make, and you don't have to worry about anything, right? You know, and I think this is reality is that not everybody's an entrepreneur, Marielle. Not everybody wants to take the risk. Like for them, the risk might be, I'm leaving my fee-for-service practice with 401k and all these benefits, but I'm not seeing 20, 30 patients a day. And I've got, you know, practice managers breathing down my neck, but I might go to be a 1099 and not have as many benefits, but more capital at the end, more cash at the end of the month than I did this. And I'm also, my quality of life's better. It's a trade-off, right?
Absolutely. That's what I think is also very helpful for people to hear, especially, you know, again, coming off of this weekend where I was talking to medical students and residents and program directors and all these people who are really learning about that direct primary care exists. And there are so many DPCs in the nation that's an option. Like who I just mentioned earlier, Dr. Brian Blank in South Carolina, like they're looking for a physician. So it's like, especially if you are, you know, hey, I'm not tied to any particular location. I don't have kids. I don't have a spouse, whatever. Like, I don't care where I practice, but I'd love to do DPC. There's a lot of opportunities out there. And then, you know, Code One concierges might be adding their third and fourth physician. So it's definitely a thing now to work with a DPC clinic that is already open.
Yeah. And that's, I think the benefit to that is that I'm sure you could tell, like if you've seen, the old saying is, if you see one DPC, you've seen one DPC, right? And in other words, for the people who aren't doing this, like they might say to themselves, like, what does that even mean, right? And that means that everyone has their own way of doing things and processes that are dependent on location, practice patterns, EMRs, unfortunately, fortunately, it dictates a practice pattern. And so you have to figure out what style suits you, right? And who you are. Like, for anybody that's coming on, the practice owner takes a lot of risk in building the networks, but maybe this physician is coming on adds his value add is 2x whatever he's getting paid, and then maybe later we do a partnership or some sort of agreement. I'm okay with that, right? I always try to be a team player and we all win together. Because if someone's taking advantage of someone else, I don't want to see that. So yeah.
And I love that, when you're talking about things, you're really underlying all of that is transparency. And, I've had people reach out to talk about, like, how do I talk to so-and-so about joining their practice? And it's like, well, one of the things is we work in a transparent space. Like, our membership is X amount of dollars per month or per year, whatever it is. It's the same thing. Like, if you would like to be part of this transparent world, then, say, like, I'm making this much at this job. Like, I would love to make this amount, but realistically, like, to make my life continue with the, lifestyle that I have right now, to put food on the table for my kids, like, this is what I'm looking for. How could that be possible? Is it possible? Like, talk transparently, because especially like when we talk about being relationship-based doctors and we're in this for the long haul, when you have a partner join you, I mean, it's not expected to be a short-term thing. And so having those transparent talks, like, you don't have to agree on everything, but dang, when it comes to being able to work together, that definitely leads to less, resentment, hostility chances in the future. So I definitely would encourage people who are looking to join, just, think about it from that transparent spot as well.
Yeah. And that's funny because it's been a couple of months since I was back in the ER, but there is not the reflexive, just be open and honest with your patients in that world, right? It's always like, we're going to keep this veil between you and me. We're going to keep this veil of like what's going on behind the scenes. It's, for medical legal reasons or whatever, right? Like, and what I tell my patients straight up is, I don't know everything. I will never lie to you. I will hide anything from you. So if you have a question or you have a concern, just tell me. And if the reverse is true, like, hey, I'm worried that you might be an alcoholic. No, I'm not. Everyone drinks like that. Well, this is why, right? And you just have these conversations. And as long as people know that you're coming from a place of honesty, you never have to worry about what you said. You don't have to worry about, again, it's just easier. It's psychologically easier to be open and transparent. So if there's someone who's looking to join a DPC practice and the practice won't tell, this is what we make and this is what the numbers are, walk away. Let's just don't talk yourself into it, because it seems like a great deal, but it isn't ever.
Absolutely. I think of somebody sent me a Doximity message that was like, work like Doc Hollywood in this rural town called Arnold, California. And I'm like, that's where my practice is. That's hilarious. And they're like $300,000 sign-on bonus. And like, it was very absolutely draped in a veil of like, who are you talking about? Like, we only got 2 big corporations in the area and I left one. Like, which one are you talking about? And so,
oh my God.
Yeah, I was like, that speaks a lot to the desperation of care in places. So anyways, let me ask you now about the people who've joined your practice. When you opened, because you said you opened with those initial 60 and then you grew, how many of your patients are individual or family patients versus how many of your patients are coming to you through an employer?
I only have about 10 patients that are employer. These are all individuals and families, word of mouth. I just hired a marketing person, or we want to go after the employer market, because that's a really good way to grow. And in fact, one of my new patients, he and the guy who referred him last month, were both relatively new. They both own huge corporations. And so they want to have the conversation about, can you do what you do for all of our employees? And I'm like, yeah. So it's mostly individuals and families that we may change to corporations. Again, for me, it's just been a bandwidth issue. And honestly, like, I think Shane Purcell, I believe he's in South Carolina. He does that really well. And so I think that's how we really grow. And luckily where I live, there's a lot of small to medium companies that really need, as I'm sure you can tell, it's just, they don't even know what's involved. Like, what does that even mean?
It's so true. And it's coming from both sides of the relationship with employers. And when I say that, I mean the people who are typically the brokers who have sold BUCA plans to people for level funded healthcare plans, and then the doctors who are, doing this. And so I will put a shout out to Rosetta Fest. I was very grateful to have co-emceed that last month in Chicago, where, over 750 people who were registered are working in this space of how do we grow DPC with employers. So, employers from 27 employees to over 300,000 employees. And that is an annual event that happens every year. So I definitely encourage physicians to go, because it's a great place to network with people who are in that space exactly, where they're like, we have employees, we have the employers, we just don't know where the DPCs are. And it's like, yes, there are mappers and things like that, but it's like, there is definitely a need for people who are physicians to say like, hey, I'm over here in the Austin area. I know you have employers over there, because it's not like my neck of the woods when there's, we're an hour and a half from the nearest Target. So I love that, you're talking about this potential space, because it definitely is a space that has a ton of potential. And, it doesn't have to be that you can only work with employers that have like thousands of employees. It's like, if you make a difference in the lives of 27 people who work for the auto mechanic, that's amazing. And then they're going to tell their neighbors, their friends, and then there's that more word of mouth going, right? So tell me now, when you're talking though about hiring a person to help market your practice to employers, what's the strategy there? What are you thinking about as the value proposition that you'd like the marketing person to help get out there in the community?
Yeah, so it's challenging. And I think the way that we're approaching it, we've tried it before with someone who was a traditional, drumming up business for, specialist type clinics, and it didn't work so well. And I'm not sure why, but I think this time my marketing strategist is, we're talking about, I think what I'd like to do is work with these two new patients who have these large corporations and say, hey, I would like to, after you had some more experience, can we do some video marketing, like do some videos, and I'd like to go in person and talk to their companies and say, or whatever, like group of other employers, and say, here's what we can offer you. Here's what is possible. Get some other people to help us, and then use those videos and these talks, right? Video, record me giving a talk, and then use that in sort of video retargeting ads. Like, hey, are you an employer looking for affordable health care or health coverage for your employees? Is absenteeism crushing you, right? Are you getting crushed with, your out of pocket? And the one guy who owns a very large company here, let's say he's got about very large, but multiple millions, over 100 employees. We talked about how much he pays every month for his portion of the premiums. And I said, it's like $50,000-$60,000. I'm like, I'm not the guy to do this. I know someone who does. A shout out to Neer Patel. But I will say that there is a way to do this with a level funded plan where you can recoup most of that, drive your month-to-month costs down, decrease absenteeism, and then if the money is left over at the end of the year, it just comes back to you guys to use it. He's like, what? This is a thing? This is a very successful business, but never heard of it. I'm like, this is one of my challenges, is to learn more about this, because when I talk to guys like Neer, I hear Shane, I saw the talk at the DPC, at the meetup in Minneapolis. I felt like someone was speaking in stereo instructions, and I was like, okay, I don't really understand what's going on, but I need to learn more. So that's going to be the focus this next year, is to make sure we get more employers.
Well, hopefully I'll see you at Rosetta Fest next year. I will put a shout out also to Neer, though, because Neer and his wife, Dr. Katrina Iqbal from DirectMed, were also mentioned Michael Garrett. That's awesome. They were on the podcast, I want to say, in like maybe episode 26. So definitely take a listen to their episode. But Neer gives a great, a primer on like, what's a level funded plan? What's a self-funded plan, et cetera, et cetera. So it is definitely new, terminology, but so is opening a business and getting an LLC or an S Corp or whatever. And we did those things. So like, hard things are doable. Yeah. So you can totally learn.
Yeah. Neer's the guy who helped me get the current company that we have. They reached out to me wanting to solve a problem. And I said, well, had you heard about this kind of same thing we just talked about? And the lady called me and said, what? That's a thing? I'm like, yeah, it's a thing. She started asking a lot of technical detailed questions. And I said, let me send you over to Neer. And then I didn't hear anything for like 2 months. And then boom, Neer's like, hey, Pete, we're going to sign them up. And here's what we do. So shout out to Neer. It worked, right? And they're happy so far. They're really happy.
Love it. Now, when it comes to your training initially as an ER physician, now turned DPC doctor with those ER skills, under your belt, I want to ask, because it's different for like me as a family doctor. I worked in the ER during residency, very different experience than what you lived for years, right? So when you talk about that you are an ER trained physician and you're a DPC doctor, what are the things that you would very frequently see in the ER that could be more acute level type stuff that you handle in your DPC practice because you're an ER trained doctor? And what things should people think about if they're like, I totally want to make sure that I offer acute type care in my clinic? What are the things that you recommend people either have on hand or look into for beefing up their skills to be able to be confident to provide that care?
Fracture management, it's a good one. As long as it's not an open fracture, you should be able to manage that in the clinic. Even if you don't have imaging, it doesn't matter. If you can see like a distal radius fracture, foot fracture, whatever, you can often do a hematoma block, which if you don't know what, YouTube is great for that. You don't know what to do, and then you splint it, and then you can get them rapid follow-up, or you can send them to the imaging to get a stat X-ray, and they'll love you for it. Laceration repair, know which lacerations are appropriate for your clinic and your skill and comfort level. Know which ones need to be referred out. Minor burns, again, know the indications for which needs proper burn management, burn care. Not everything needs to go to the ER, or not everything needs to go to a burn center, but some things do. So usually it's hands crossing the creases, face, genitals, are certainly over 10% BSA, depends. And that's also a local practice pattern. If you have a burn center in your town, they may say, sure, we'll see them, or hey, you can give them a call and they'll follow up with the patient on 2 or 3 days. Giving infusions, I'm plus minus on that. For my patients, I'm okay with, if they're having GI issues and they need to resuscitate, like get a liter of fluid. Both of my nurses have either got critical care or ER training. Turns out I can do an IV. You don't want me doing IVs because eventually you're going to get infiltration or you get bruising. It's a horror show, but I can do it, right? So if you're micro practice and you're comfortable starting IVs, I would learn that skill, learn how to start an IV, learn how to do phlebotomy. If you want to, save your patients a trip to the lab. And now if you don't use like lab, I don't know how LabQuest, we use Central Pathology Laboratories, CPL here in Central Texas. They don't really provide you any supplies. You have to pay for it yourself, so it can be expensive. But if like some companies like Access Medical Labs, where they fly it to Florida, they do it and they give you the results in 48 hours. They provide you all the supplies that you need so you can learn how to do labs. We did that. I did that for the first 6 to 8 months, and my patients loved being able to come do that. So that's one thing you can do. What else? Foreign body removal, depending on where it is. Learn how to get things out of the eyes, the nose, the ears. I'm trying to think. So, abscess management. Oh yeah, duh. Abscess management's a big one. Like, don't be afraid to lance a boil. You don't need to be a surgeon to lance a boil. It just depends on what your experience. I've seen people say, oh, I'm sorry. The hospitals will say the surgeon needs to consult and do an abscess. And you're like, come on, really? But that's okay if that's not what you're doing. So those are some basic skills. I treat mostly adults. And so when I first opened the practice, I thought I would need a lot more meds. So I had a lot of injectable antibiotics like ceftriaxone and clindamycin. I rarely use them, really. Just don't really need it because most of my patients have access and I just don't see that many critically ill. I do keep Pen-G because strep is the thing. And usually if I say, hey, would you like a shot today or 10 days of pills? They'll usually go for the shot because they just want to get it over with, right? So be comfortable doing that and being able to do it. If you are a doctor and you have a micro practice and you have never actually injected meds before, go get the nursing handbook, learn how to do it. That will save you from doing things that I may have done when I first started that. I then called my nurse practitioner friends and be like, what did I do? And they're like, you idiot. This is what you need to go do. So that's the kind of stuff I would talk about.
I love it. And, I'm laughing over here, just not that because the situation was funny, but just because it was like only in DPC, man. I'm visiting Dr. Emily Scott and Dr. James Gore's practice in Irvine, California, Halcyon Health DPC. And I'm sitting there like working in their office. And then all of a sudden this mom comes in. She's like, my son was hit by a car. No, he was run over by a car. And he's like literally a block away. And no open fracture, no blood. But it was like, she walked him into, and James was there helping him walk into the clinic. And he's like I'm an ER trained physician, man. I gotcha. So he's like, doing this thing. He's on the phone, calling his friends like, hey, I would like to get an x-ray just to make sure, he's doing okay. But like the kid has no worries about needing to follow up, about concussion, about, if there's something going on day after day after day as he heals. It was insane. I was like, go figure, man. I'm like literally sitting here, like working on charts, and then like in somebody else's DPC, and this is what happens, like only in DPC, man. But I love it because, when we talk about what are we actually doing, some people ask, like, not only is this real, like you said, that lady, the employer asked you, but also like, so what do you do? Like I had this question. Do you just like refer people out for everything? And so one of the things that I loved that I think it was on maybe your website was that you had your own laceration paper. And I love that. It's like, oh no, like when you actually go to Dr. Cashio's site, he's like a real doctor.
I'd like to give a shout out to my friend, Dr. Ben Silverberg at West WVU. He's a family medicine trained guy. We met in residency, and he reached out to me like 2 years ago, and he's like, hey, Pete, you want to be on a paper? I'm like, sure, right? Everything you said. And also the thing I would say is have OPAs, oral pharyngeal airway, just a little curved C thing that you can stick in someone's tongue if they ever have a seizure or they just have an airway issue. I mean, you can get an AED. You don't need an AED, but if you have one, great. Another procedure is if you can do an EKG in your office, do an EKG if you know how to interpret them. And finally, have at least oral glucose, like cake frosting, and have 1 dose or 2 doses of an injectable benzo, because I had a guy who had a seizure for the first time in my clinic. Thankfully, my nurse was there, and she's like, hey, Dr. Cashio. I'm like, oh, he's having a seizure. Neither one was freaked out, right? And we had what we needed. But I mean, it's not that I would use it that often. So, but those are some additional things I would have, and then have 911 on speed, or just the 911, and make sure that if you're thinking about what to do procedure wise, how close is the nearest EMS, station from you? Like, thankfully ours is within 3 minutes. So it's not a big deal.
Mine is at this moment in time, like across the street. So it's pretty cool when you can have that access, even in rural America.
Dark and call 911. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But no, like I think about it also when you're talking about maintaining an airway. I think back to like when my son was, to Kipnick, and like one thing I would say is Decadron. Like we all have access to Decadron, and we're getting into flu season. Like that's definitely something that, is pennies on the dollar. It's like $20 for the whole bottle, and you're giving, a kid a little bit of that. And then I definitely would say, things like you don't have to buy an EpiPen. You can actually get epinephrine for pennies, and
it's dirt cheap. Yeah,
that's dirt cheap. So those are other things that, like, I found I would not want to have this happen, but if it happened, these are the things that I would like to have. So you've dropped a ton of gems, so I love it.
Learn how to inject joints, knees, like steroid injections, right? The shoulders, knees. It's very useful. Your patients will love you. They'll feel good. Just basic stuff. And I'm forgetting the author, but the big yellow procedures for family medicine doctors that I have on my shelf, really useful. I think maybe that's where Vince last learned how to do his, a kid, Vince, but it tells you how to do a vasectomy in there. I'm like, okay, not doing this, but moving on. These are all good things to have, so.
Absolutely. And just for people who don't have that yet, Fenninger and Fowler's Procedures for Primary Care.
That's it.
Excellent book. You can buy it used, you can buy it new, but that is an absolute must, definitely for people who are doing procedures, but just for anybody who's doing DPC, because it's a great reference for, if you're practicing doing something, learning a new skill, it's an extra, resource to have that's quality.
Taught me how to remove an IUD out of that. So there you go. Not something we do in the ER. Go to OB. Oh no, I'm your guy. Okay.
I shake my head at that, because especially those of us who have been, in the world of medicine for a while, it's like, there's things like that where it's like, seriously, that's what you did with your ER training. Like, oh my gosh, I shake my head at that.
Well, no, but it's the thing that especially if you're just getting started or thinking like DPC curious, your patients, because they trust you, will want you to do just about everything. I suspect if I was a woman, I'd have a lot more GYN, right? And just women are more comfortable doing that with their OB, and that's fine. God bless them, right? But I've had several that shocked me. Like, will you please do all my well woman exams? Okay, right? And so they have an established OB/GYN. They just would rather, they like and trust you enough. So be prepared to do more than you're used to doing in fee for service.
And I definitely hear stories all the time like, I did a PAP today and I'm an internal medicine doctor. It's like, yes, you can also do a PAP if you did internal medicine. So it's totally doable. We do lots of things.
Yeah.
But yeah. So now let me ask you there, when it comes to going back to your experience as a Marine and when you were talking about these
Sure.
processes before, when you are looking at, doing everything like when you opened, it was just you. Now you're going to have physicians join you. But when it comes to like inventory and workflows, when it comes to just learning from what you've been doing to see if it could be improved on, you mentioned, I think this was back in like during the time you opened in 2020, where you had a video of yourself and you were talking about working out and how important it was, but you also said every little thing you do has consequences. And so looking at your practice, when you see your workflows, when you see your inventory, when you see like the management of the everyday things that are separate from your medical degree, how would you talk to, people from your experience as a Marine and how to best, address the workflows, the processes, and make sure that they're continuing to work for your best practice?
So I don't know that the Marine Corps is the best. I mean, Marine Corps is good. People have an image of the Marine Corps, Marines as being very regimented. But the Marines, as an aside, are very flexible. Like, just get the mission done. Here are the parameters. Good luck to you. Actually, the best model for that is surgeons. If you've ever been in the OR, and all of us who've been through medical school had been in the OR, you'll watch how the surgeon there's a flow. If you watch the instrument is to where he reaches out and someone puts it in his hand, it's all about reducing your cognitive load, right? And so that sounds very fancy, but are you going to prefer, if you're going to set up an IVs, right? If you're going to set up an IV, well, do you have everything you need right in front of you, or do you have to go back and forth and do? So even when I only had an 800 square foot space, I still had my 2 exam rooms. I had my lab room, which also had a lot of my extra supplies, and so it was just like, oh, I have to go back and forth. And it becomes frustrating because I have to think, oh, where's this thing? And where's that thing? And there's only so much, think of the mental energy you have. There's only a finite amount each day, and you can increase it over time. But if you have to think where everything is and think, oh, I need to have this. Oh, oh, crap, I forgot about that. And you're running back, you're going to drive yourself crazy. Your patients will be frustrated. Okay. So what I always tell people is like, it's easy to just start doing. A lot of people just want to get going. They want to start and they just want, I'll figure it out. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you need to stop and think, have quiet time and imagine yourself going through the different things. If you're going to do an EKG, what does that look like? I wish I was in my office and I could show you a video of how we have this procedure room now, which used to be my old office. And we have a big, husky tool chest that we've turned in. And I had set it up to where I thought it was going to work. And then I had my nurse come behind me and say, okay, Rebecca, now, is that how you would put things? Or if not, why? And she was like, no, I would put these because you're going to use these together. And you're like, oh, okay. And so we've now had to do several procedures, the EKGs and everything. And the flow works, right? And it has to work for not just the person doing it, but for other people need to understand it, right? Or to another example of, okay, you're the patient and you're coming into your clinic, my clinic for the first time. How is that experience? When someone calls you after you've enrolled online, you haven't talked to any of us. What is that experience like? My office manager, Sandra, calls and says, hi, Mrs. Smith, we are so happy to have you. Is everything okay? Did you have any questions? Okay, and here's the step. And there's a series of texts that they get and emails. We're very nice about like following up. And then when they come in, Dr. Paul, I think Plum Health guy, sorry, forgetting his last name right now. When people come into his office, like he stands there and he greets them and says hello. We do that as much as we can, and it's like, would you like some coffee? Is there anything that we can get you? And then we said, if you need to stop the interview and go to the restroom, please do that. I thought through this whole process. When they have to go to the bathroom, where's the bathroom? When they walk into the bathroom, is everything where they don't have to guess where things are? It's seriously like, it's those little things that will save you so much friction, not only for yourself, but your patients too, because they don't have to guess, right? So that takes a lot of mental effort and it's hard and you will constantly be refining it. But it's how like these 5-star hotels, that's how they kick ass and take names because their hotel rooms are really no better than anybody else. but it's the service and the thoughtfulness. So you need to be very thoughtful about what would you want as a patient? What were the things that drive you crazy? Well, assuming that you have a doctor, Mr. DPC doctor, when you go to the doctor, what frustrates you? Do you have to sit in a waiting room with other people coughing into your ears?
Totally. And, you mentioned the hotels, but like I mentioned earlier that I went to, a few hours in Disneyland. It's like, what is the number one thing that you can expect to see at Disneyland at the front is like all the people with their tablets who are like, do you mind if I ask you a few questions about your visit today? And then even after you go, you get it popping up in your mailbox. Like, please fill out a guest survey about your recent experience at Disneyland. And so, when it comes to just strategy is how to reflect, somebody who very much love and respect Dr. Allison Edwards, she had talked about how when it comes to even being able to ask our patients, generally they want us to survive, because if we survive, we continue to be their doctor. Our businesses don't shut down. And it's not common for DPCs to shut down. That's definitely a question that I get often. What Dr. Allison Edwards had mentioned was the Larry Green Center person-centered primary care measure. And so that is a way that she spoke about being able to, engage with your patients on a different level that actually matters, because you as the business owner are asking your patients, like, how could I be better? In addition to thinking, like, if I were my patient, oh my gosh, now that patient who has knee osteoarthritis or Parkinson's tremor, when they came into the office, I definitely said to myself, like, these are the things that I would not do the next time or whatever. And so if that means like taping down carpets, or like you're saying, making sure that things are accessible, that people don't have to look for where's the toilet paper refill, that it's really important. But that it also speaks to how individualized our clinics are, like how you were saying earlier, everyone looks different, but there are definitely ways to constantly, improve and invest the time that you have, reinvest it back in your business.
And I would also make sure that people think about the processes, right? Like communications, you want to keep it simple. I try, and it doesn't always work. Humans are going to human, I say, but if I tell my patients, if there's a medical emergency, don't email me. I won't check it for 24 hours, and then oops, you're in trouble. If it's an emergency or you're really concerned and it's urgent, text me. And then I funnel everything through my office staff, but my office staff is very good about returning, like, we're Johnny on the spot. We've even responded at 8 or 9 o'clock at night in some cases. Not that anyone has to, but that's just the way we work, right? And so, like, my patients really adapt to that. And they're like, they know it's not hard to get a hold of me. It's not hard to see me. It's not hard to, if nothing else, we have a nurse that will call them, right? So you want to think about, okay, they're paying you, but what does that experience look like? And then Doug Farago talked about this in his churn book. You're going to have to constantly raise the bar, because then they'll become adapted to it and bored. And then it's like, well, what else have you done for me, right? So you just, the constant having to, like, okay, we're going to bring the level of what we do up a notch, right? It's unfortunate. That's just humanity, right? Like, you want to keep it interesting and fresh.
Awesome. So now in closing, I want to ask if you can drop any additional words of inspiration or hope for those physicians out there who are like, this is really inspiring. I really am still on the fence, though, about doing DPC.
We're all dying at some rate, right? We're all going to die someday. It's a fact of life. And you get to choose how you live your life, right? Like, if you are in a terrible situation, at some point you have chosen that, right? And I was telling a new patient today about, he's like, I hate this thing that I do, and I hate it. I'd rather be doing this. Yeah, but it makes a lot of money. And I'm like, do you have enough money to walk away? He's like, yeah. I'm like, then this is your choice. So all of us as physicians have the ability to live a good life, to live a far above average life if we choose, no matter what our circumstances are, right? So ultimately, you just have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If none of us went into med school knowing what we were going to do, any previous training or knowledge we had prior to med school probably got wiped away in the first 6 weeks. No kidding, right? We were all just like, oh my God. And so we've all now gotten comfortable, even comfortable with a toxic relationship. And let's be real, for most physicians, their medical practice environment is toxic. It's an abusive relationship. And so why are you doing it, right? So you just have to get so sick of it that you're ready to change. And then once you decide to change, it will eventually get better. You can do this. I'm a smart guy. Am I brilliant genius level? No, but a lot of DPC docs did it before me. Hell, Mike Garrett showed me the way. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of imposter syndrome at the beginning. Like, who am I to be doing X? I will say this, like I had my former marketing gal, I love her to death. She heard me on a previous podcast and she says, you were referring people to different people, but you're that good. They should just come to you. You are that good. And I had to go, oh, yes, you're right. It made me mad, which means that she was telling the truth. And so you will become good enough. You will become excellent enough. Embrace it. As physicians, we are always so hard on each other and ourselves. We are. We're vicious. And DPC is not like that. And so you can have a better life, but you have to choose it and you have to work for it. And it's not just going to be handed to you. But if you choose that way, then good luck. You will have a much better experience. And I can tell you today, like I actually love being a physician again. But right before I started my DPC, I was like, no way. I'm not ever going to, like, as hard as I worked and all the sacrifices I made, I quit. And now I'm here and I'm like, I can't, this is what I do. And this is who I am. So
love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Cashio, for joining us today.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, Marielle. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Next week, look forward to hearing from Dr. Maggie Abraham of the GYN Space in Orlando, Florida. If you've enjoyed the podcast and you haven't yet done so, subscribe today and share the episode with a physician you may know who needs to hear about DPC. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify now as well, as it helps others to find all these DPC stories. Lastly, be sure to follow us on social media. If you're wanting to continue learning more about DPC in the meantime, check out dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Concepcion.